Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order, and we're going to begin with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. We will now have a moment of silent reflection, followed by the playing of our national anthem. Please stand for the playing of our national anthem. If we can begin with an adoption of our agenda for the February 10th, 2026 regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Richo Spagnolo, support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? That carries. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, looking for an adoption of the minutes of our closed and regular meetings of council held January 27th, 2026. Moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? And that carries. All right. As everyone is aware, February is Black History Month. This year's theme is 30 Years of Black History Month, honoring Black brilliance across generations, from nation builders to tomorrow's visionaries. This theme highlights the enduring contributions of Black Canadians across time. It acknowledges the foundational role of nation builders, those who fought for civil rights, advanced social justice, and shaped Canada's cultural and political landscape. At the same time, it looks forward to tomorrow's visionaries, the emerging leaders, innovators, and changemakers who are redefining excellence in every field. Today, we're going to watch a video about Viola Davis Desmond, who was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She was an African Canadian who ran her own beauty parlor and beauty college in Halifax, Nova Scotia. On November 8th, 1946, while waiting for her car to be repaired, she decided to go see a movie in the Roseland Theatre in New Glasgow. She refused to sit in the balcony, which was designated exclusively for Blacks. Instead, she sat on the ground floor, which was for whites only. She was forcibly removed and arrested. We invite all Canadians to learn more about Black Canadian communities and how they continue to help shape Canada. For more information, visit the Black History Month page on the Government of Canada's website. We now have a short video for you.
November 8th, 1946. Viola Desmond, an entrepreneur from Halifax, is on a business trip when her car breaks down in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. Forced to stay overnight, Desmond decides to pass the evening at the movies. She buys her ticket and enters the downstairs auditorium.
The ticket seller followed her into the theater and stopped her and said, "You can't sit here. You can't sit on the main floor." She went back and she said, "I'd like a main floor ticket, please." And the white ticket seller said to her, We don't sell main floor tickets to you people.
In a spontaneous decision, Desmond turns and enters the downstairs theater. The manager is called, and a policeman.
She's very small, very feminine, very elegant woman. And this white, burly police officer grabbed her by the shoulders and physically dragged her out of the theater onto the street.
She's thrown in jail, and she's left there for 12 hours. She was probably in a state of shock. I mean, you're stunned. What could I have done to deserve this?
In 1946, Viola Desmond is a woman ahead of her time. She owns a hair salon, a beauty school, and her own line of beauty products.
She was a thriving businesswoman. Her own car, her own shop, her own school. She had visions just to expand across the province.
But despite Desmond's personal success, racism and discrimination continuously undermine the human rights of Black Canadians.
Segregation means separate. And blacks and whites were separate. The racism in the United States was truly in your face. In Canada, the racism is very polite. It's sort of undercover.
Communities like Halifax's Africville are neglected, deprived of routine services given to white communities. Blacks are denied admission to businesses, and many schools and neighborhoods are segregated. But racist policies in Canada aren't fixed. They vary with the time, the place, and the context.
Some of the Black people in Canada have said it was actually worse in some ways in Canada, because you never knew when you went into a restaurant or a theater, was it segregated or not.
After spending the night in jail, Desmond is brought to trial the following morning.
She's not given her rights. She's not told she can have representation. And she was found guilty of defrauding the government of 1 penny.
1 cent. The difference between the upstairs and downstairs amusement tax.
And nobody admitted it was about race segregation. It was all just about tax evasion.
Desmond appeals with support from prominent members of the Halifax Black community. Ultimately, the case goes before the Nova Scotia Supreme Court, which refuses to reverse the conviction.
She described herself as bitterly disappointed.
The impact on her was severe. Before this incident, she was just somebody in the prime of her career. She could go very far. It seemed like it all stopped on that day.
Desmond gives up her dream of a chain of beauty salons. Her marriage disintegrates, and eventually she leaves Halifax.
She's clearly a heroine, but it's not easy for heroines. She paid a great deal personally for this case.
I think Viola Desmond's impact on racial inequality was a great one. It opened up the doors and gave people that opportunity to say, you know what, we're going to stand up and we're going to fight for our rights.
In the decades that followed, groups like the Black United Front and the Nova Scotia Association for the Advancement of Colored People continued the fight for Black equality in Canada. In 2010, Lieutenant Governor Mayanne Francis gives Desmond a posthumous free pardon, an admission by the government that she was wrongly convicted.
It took all these years for a woman of color to free her. And my only hope is that she's at peace.
Okay, and again, remind everyone if they want to learn more to visit the Government of Canada's website. Continuing with our mayor's comments, as we head into Valentine's Day and Family Day weekend, there are many wonderful ways to enjoy time together right here in LaSalle. I encourage residents to visit the LaSalle Skate Loop, which is open daily from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Whether you're skating with your sweetheart, friends, or family, it is a great way to get outside and stay active. Free skate lending is also available on Saturdays and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., making it easy for everyone to join in. On Family Day, Monday, February 16th, the Vollmer Center will be offering recreational swims and public skating opportunities. I encourage families to visit our website for the full schedule and registration details. Please also note that our municipal offices will be closed for the holiday. And I'd also like to remind everyone that nominations for the LaSalle Awards of Excellence have been extended until next Tuesday. So if you have someone in mind who has helped shape LaSalle into a vibrant and caring community that you are proud to call home, I really hope you would encourage them to submit a nomination. Again, the deadline is Tuesday, February 17th at 4:30 p.m. Find all the information on our website. That's all I have, so we can move right into item F1, which is our public meeting and our hearing, which is development charge bylaw. And I will turn it over to our Director of Finance, Mr. Langlois.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So this study has been prepared to support the town's proposed development charges bylaw and outlines the anticipated growth-related capital needs over the planning period, as well as the associated costs and proposed development charge rates. The background study was prepared in accordance with the Development Charges Act and is being presented today as part of the required public consultation process. This evening, we're joined by our consultant from Watson & Associates, Daryl Abbs, who will walk council and the public through the key findings, assumptions, and recommendations of the study. Following the presentation, council will have an opportunity to ask questions for clarification, and members of the public will also have an opportunity to provide comments later in the meeting in accordance with our procedural bylaw. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Abbs.
Thanks, Dale. Appreciate the introduction. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of council. Pleasure to be here this evening. I have a brief presentation to go through and then happy to answer any questions. Perfect. So we'll start off by talking a little bit about why we have this public meeting, mainly because it's required, but also because it provides an opportunity to summarize the details set out in the development charges background study. It is a few hundred pages, so this is a good opportunity to summarize the information for the public and for council. We'll provide a brief overview of development charges, what they are, why municipalities use them, talk a little bit about some of the recent legislative changes that have occurred over the last few years, and then talk about some of the policy matters that were reviewed as part of this process. We'll then get into the anticipated growth and development that the town is looking to accommodate and the resulted charges that are calculated as part of this background study. We'll wrap up with a survey of development charges in the area, and then again, happy to answer any questions. And so I mentioned the public meeting is required under the Development Charges Act. The Development Charges Act is the piece of legislation that guides the implementation of development charges, calculation of the development charges themselves, and the requirement to prepare a development charges background study. That background study must be prepared and posted on the town's website at least 60 days prior to council passing the development charge bylaw, and I'll show the timeline of that we're following as part of the study that shows that we've more than met that requirement. And so we started working with staff in March, working through November to prepare the detailed calculations and review the policies. We released the background study on the town's website December 22nd, 2025. We're advertised for this public meeting on January 20th, having this public meeting tonight, and then anticipated that council will consider the bylaw on March 10th. So development charges are a revenue tool used by municipalities to recover the capital costs associated with new development. And so we have new residential development, new subdivisions being built, new businesses coming to town. And because of those new businesses, new houses, the town needs to build infrastructure to accommodate that development. And so development charges are to recover the cost of that infrastructure. These costs are in addition to what a developer would normally pay for as part of their subdivision. So you can think of a typical subdivision, the internal roads, water mains, sewer mains, etc., typically paid for by the developer. Development charges are to recover the broader capital costs to connect those developments together. And I'll talk a little bit about the local service policy as we go through this process. Some of the legislative changes have made that more of a requirement. And so as part of this process, we've really dug in with staff to make sure that that's clear. The local service policy sets out what's the developer's responsibility and then what goes into the development charge calculation. Typically, development charges were payable at the time of building permit issuance. There's some changes to the legislation that have occurred, so I'll talk about that as I get to that section. One thing to note, and this schematic just puts it very simply, the money needs to come from somewhere. And so at the top, we have the bubble that says we need to service new growth. And so again, I mentioned we have new growth coming to the town. You need to build infrastructure to accommodate that growth. To the extent that the infrastructure, those costs are related to new development, you can use development charges to fund that infrastructure. If you don't use development charges, the money needs to come from somewhere. And so if it's a tax supported service, that money comes from your tax supported reserves or taxes. And if it's a rate supported service, water, wastewater, it would come from your rates or your rate supported reserves. So the Development Charges Act has something like 70 clauses and years of Ontario Land Tribunal Municipal Board case law that kind of guides how we calculate the charges. But what we do is we first identify the amount, type, and location of growth that we're trying to accommodate. And from there, we need to identify the servicing needs to accommodate that growth. Item number 3 then says, well, what are those specific projects that would meet the needs of the growth? And what we have is in Chapter 5 of the background study, all of the detailed projects by service that are required to accommodate new development. Once we identify those costs, we need to make a series of deductions. We can't put all of that cost onto new development. We can only put the growth related costs. So if there's any grants, subsidies, or other contributions, we make a deduction for that. Any amounts that benefit the existing community. So for example, if we knock down a fire facility and build a bigger fire facility, we need to make a deduction for the fact that we're replacing something that was there today. Any amounts in excess of this historical level of service calculation we need to do, and then any balance in the development charge reserve funds need to be applied to the calculations. So from there, we have the net costs associated with growth. We then allocate that between residential growth and non-residential growth, divided by the growth in each of those categories to calculate the development charge. So put very simply, we take those costs associated with growth, divided by the growth, and we come up with a development charge per unit for residential growth. And that's a single and semi-detached units versus townhouses versus large and small apartments. And then for non-residential development, it's on a per square foot of gross floor area. In terms of the services, the Development Charges Act lists 19 services that municipalities can impose a development charge for. What we've highlighted here is what we've looked at as part of this study, so water, wastewater services, services related to a highway, which is really your roads, transit, police, fire, library, parks and recreation services. What's noted on the side is actually that we've created classes of service, which is allowable under the Act. So things like growth studies, public works operations, and land might relate to a number of those services. So we can group those things together and create services in the bylaw. So there was a number of legislative changes that have occurred since the town's previous bylaw. I won't go into the specific details of all of the legislative changes, but just summarize because some of the changes were implemented and then pulled back, and it gets a little confusing, I think, for the public. So generally with Bill 23, the main changes are some additional exemptions and discounts from the development charge. The other main change here is that the development charge bylaw used to expire after 5 years. Now the DC bylaw expires after 10 years. So you can wait 10 years to update your bylaw. You can update it sooner if things change, major capital plans change or growth changes, but it will expire after 10 years. So one of those main exemptions that came in with Bill 23 was affordable housing. The initial definition that came in with Bill 23, there were some challenges with that. The province heard from municipalities and other organizations. And so now with the affordable housing exemption from development charges, it's really based on incomes in each community. And so the ministry posts a bulletin, and if I'm a developer and I'm selling my units or renting my units at or below that price, I meet the criteria for affordable housing and I can get an exemption from development charges, as long as I enter into an agreement with the town to ensure that they will remain affordable for a period of 25 years. With respect to Bill 185, so that came in 2024, walked back some of the changes that were brought in from Bill 23, and then introduced this process for minor amendments to DC bylaws, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So we had changes in 2022, 23, 24, and now 2025. So the changes brought in by Bill 17 are an additional exemption for long-term care homes, some changes to the definition of a capital cost, which allows the province to be a bit more flexible in changing what's eligible. And then this simplified process for amending development charge bylaws. So under these three criteria, if you want to repeal or change the development charge bylaw to allow for that 10-year period, you want to repeal your indexing provisions. Once we calculate the charge, they inflate every year with the construction price index posted by StatsCan. If you wanted to repeal that in 1 or 2 or 3 years, you can do so. Or if you want to decrease the development charge for one or more types of development, you can go through this quick amendment process. And so the benefit to municipalities here is that normally when we do an amendment process, we need to prepare a background study, need to do a public meeting. That background study needs to be on your website for a minimum of 60 days. Then once it's passed, it can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Under this simplified process, you can just bring forward a bylaw, pass it, provide notice that it passed. So if in 1 or 2 or 3 years you decide, oh, we want to have an exemption for a certain type of development, or we want to get rid of the indexing, for example, you can do so by simply passing a bylaw amendment, and then it will take effect immediately. So one positive change here, I think, for municipalities. The main change was a deferral of the development charge payment for residential development to occupancy. So I mentioned at the beginning, most typically developments would pay their development charge at the time of building permit issuance. They go to the counter to get their building permit, they'd pay their development charge, get their building permit, and then they're good to go. Now what's required is that residential development gets to pay at occupancy if they choose. And so it would require an occupancy permit so that when they come and get their occupancy permit, then they would pay the development charge. So some administrative challenges or changes for municipalities to deal with. So that's one major change there. And then for certain types of development, rental housing and institutional development, they get to pay in installments. We used to be able to impose interest on that. Now we can't impose interest on those. With respect to certain types of development, if the development proceeds through site plan or zoning bylaw amendment, they get to pay their development charge at the rate when they submitted their application. So they submit their application, their rate is frozen at that time. Then the town is 18 months after approval, the developer can pull their building permit and get that frozen rate. The municipality has to now calculate that frozen rate, compare it to the rate of the day, and charge the lower of those two rates. And then with respect to reporting requirements, we previously used to have to identify 60% of the balance of a reserve funds for water, wastewater, and roads, and allocate them to specific projects or identify projects that that balance would relate to. Now we have to do that for all services. So more reporting requirements for the treasurer on an annual basis. And then lastly, with respect to indexing the charge, So typically what we do is pass the bylaw, and then we use that Statistics Canada index to keep the charge increasing with the pace of inflation. I'll talk a bit about how that's trended over the last few years. But previously there was an index for Toronto and Ottawa. Now they've implemented an index for London. So something that could be utilized. Okay, and then the most recent legislative change, which occurred just before the end of the year in 2025, was some of the more major changes we had to make to the study. And luckily we knew about these changes, that they were coming, and so we were able to make the changes before releasing the background study. And so one of the big things was land acquisition. If we have land identified for inclusion in the calculations, we need to take them out of each service, group them all together as a class of service. So we've done that. Merging of credits. So if I'm a developer and I want to build a water main that's in the development charge background study, previously I would just get a credit against that my water development charge. Now I can apply those credits to water and wastewater services. Probably not a large impact. I don't think there's a lot of that happening in the town, but it is something for staff to be aware of. And then some more reporting requirements on the approach to the calculation. So in this background study, it is a little bit longer than the last background study. We had to include an appendix which explained how we calculated the growth and the non-growth shares in the charges. And then the major change here as well was with respect to the local service policy, that policy that identifies what the developer has to construct versus what goes into the development charge calculation. We worked with town staff just to clean that up. You already had a local service policy which generally met the requirements. We just cleaned up some of the wording to ensure that it aligned exactly with the legislation. So in terms of exemptions, there's a number of mandatory exemptions from development charges. So upper tier, lower tier governments don't charge each other development charges, and same thing with school boards. If I have an industrial building and I expand up to 50%, I don't have to pay my development charge. If I expand further than that, I do have to pay development charges. Universities and colleges are also exempt from development charges. In terms of residential development, I can build up to 2 units in a single or semi-detached or row house, and I don't have to pay development charges on those 2 additional units. 1 additional unit in an existing rental residential building, affordable housing required through inclusionary zoning, nonprofit housing, affordable rental and own units, as I mentioned. And then there's also an exemption for attainable units. It's not yet defined. The province is still working on that, but that will come. So a number of mandatory exemptions for affordable long-term care, nonprofit housing built into the legislation. So in terms of discretionary exemptions, council does have the ability to reduce the charge in whole or in part for different types or classes of development. You can phase in the charge over time as well if you so choose. And so the additional discretionary exemption we've included is the commercial component of a mixed use development where the project parcel size is generally 1 acre or more. So I mentioned the local service policy. We worked with town staff to clarify some of the wording to ensure that in all cases it should be clear based on that policy when a developer comes forward with an application, what's their responsibility to build and pay for versus what we would include in the development charge calculation. So now getting into the numbers of the calculations in the background study. What we were looking at is a 10-year growth forecast of about 6,600 people in just over 2,600 residential units and about 1.35 million square feet of non-residential floor space. Over the 2051 period, so that would be about 15,877 people in just under 6,800 residential units and just under 3 million square feet of floor space. And then when we were looking at roads and we're looking at water and wastewater, we're looking at the build out forecast of about 39,000 people in just over 16,000 residential units and 6 million square feet of non-residential floor space. So the calculated rates, and I won't go through all the numbers on this table, but just to show you, this is the table that will go into the bylaw. We do have those calculated rates separately for single and semi-detached, other multiples, which are your townhouses, large and small apartments, special care, special dwelling units, and then the non-residential charges on a per square foot basis. And so to compare the rates to the current rates, what we've done here in this table for a single detached unit is the first column is your current rates using the development charge index to where they are today, right? Because that's what we're allowed to do under the bylaw. But one of the things we observed working with a number of communities is the development charge index didn't actually keep pace with the actual cost of construction. And so what we did was we took a look at the previous development charge study. We looked at the capital projects for roads, water, and wastewater. And what we did was we updated those capital costs to be more reflective of today's actual costs, using today's unit rates per kilometer of pipe or roads. And so what we saw was actually the charges would have been substantially higher than if we just used the development charge index. So when we're comparing the calculated rates today versus the current rates, the increase wouldn't be as substantial. So what that means is some of that increase is to deal with the fact that construction costs have increased substantially faster than the development charge index. And so, sorry, Deb.
I'm just going to jump in quickly. So just in other words, like we index it every year for the non-construction price index, which probably is averaged between 3 and 6% increase each year. But if you remember a couple years ago when inflation was going crazy, some of the costs nearly doubled or went up 50%. So that middle column's taking the true increase in our costs. So right now with the indexing, the urban area, the red square is what where the majority of development in the town falls. So right now they're paying $27,775 with the indexing. If we were looking at the same capital projects included at the actual cost in today's dollars, it'd be $34,759. So just to explain it in a little bit more detail, and then Mr. Abs will go over the column on the right, which includes all of our projects that we've included in the development charge study.
Yeah, exactly. So that, thanks, Dale. So that increase from today's dollars, if we look at the current rate today, that's that you're imposing, would be about $11,600 for a single detached unit. But if we were to actually take those costs, apply those actual costs, the increase really is $4,600 based on actual costs. So, so the charge will actually be going up $11,600, but again, a big portion of that is related to the fact that construction costs have increased substantially. And so what we see on the non-residential side is actually a decrease in the charge. So we actually see the non-residential charge going down by about 44 cents for development in the urban area. And this is mainly a function of a shift in the amount of growth you have forecasted. More growth is forecasted to be residential than non-residential in the previous study. And so what that does is it takes, remember I said we take the growth related costs allocated between residential growth and non-residential growth. Because there's a higher share of that residential growth, more of the costs go to the residential growth. So that's why we see this non-residential charge come down. So one of the things we looked at a high level is a pro forma, a sample pro forma for a couple types of development. And so what's important here is that when we're looking at the component of costs to build a subdivision or an apartment building, for example, how much of that is development charges. And so what we observed is the development charge represents about 3.6% of the overall cost. And the biggest component of the cost is construction costs. And just like you see construction costs going up, so does the development community. And in the case of single detached development, it was about 85% of the overall potential revenues. In the case of apartment buildings, it was over 100% of the potential revenues. So what that means is those certain types of development at today's dollars, and this is based on broad averages, may not be feasible because of the substantial cost of construction. And just to highlight that the development charge component of the overall cost is relatively small and in line with what we've seen historical averages across the province. And so when we compare the current rate, which is in the teal blue, which is about middle, and the calculated rate, which is shown with the green arrow, you'll see that the calculated rate for single detached puts you at the higher end of the forecast. Noting that the town of Essex doesn't impose development charges for water, whereas you impose development charges for all services, including water. And the Lakeshore is looking at updating their development charge study as well. And so we've included the years that these bylaws were updated so that you could see they were updated maybe a couple years ago, and then will be updated in a couple years as well when they look at new costs. With respect to non-residential development on the commercial side, again, going from that middle, the top end of the calculation down to the middle, because again, that charge is decreasing. And then looking at industrial, it's the same thing. Okay. And so the next step subsequent to this public meeting, again, happy to answer any questions after this presentation, would be for council to consider the bylaw on March 10th. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Members of council, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Carrick?
Sorry, just going back to the occupancy permit. So they don't pay the LDC until there's actually occupancy. Is there a limit on that? Or can they build a brand new building and not have occupancy for, I don't know, a long length of time?
So through the mayor, unfortunately, in the legislation, there's no limitation on that timeline. So what it says is that payment is upon occupancy or occupancy permit, whatever comes first. And so I think that's something that municipalities are trying to deal with in seeing if there can be something changed in the legislation to put a time limit, because that is kind of a gap in the legislation, I think.
So just a general comment then. So the beginning slide, basically LDC versus tax increase or reserve rating is very real. And I think that this helps offset every budget session we come to, having a land development charge to help offset some of the serious costs that we have to face. And especially moving forward, there are some items that have to be addressed. And I'm in support of an LDC for sure. And this presentation. Thank you.
Councillor Regis Pagano?
Thank you, through you. Just a question. You had stated that if a developer is offering affordable housing, they would be exempted from the DC charge. What and who deems affordable housing? Like, what's the amount? Or like, do you have information on that? Thank you.
So through the mayor, I can look it up very quickly. I can figure it out. But the ministry posts a bulletin, and that bulletin sets out the specific dollar value. But I could look that up and provide that to council subsequently.
Councillor Burns?
Yes, through you, your worship. I see long-term or long care homes are not in here. Why is that? Is it not a responsibility of the municipality to supply that?
So through the mayor, so with respect to the calculation of development charges for long-term care homes, we can include that as a development charge, but I believe that would be a county responsibility to fund, right? So that would be in a potential county's development charge.
Follow up. So that's controlled by the city of Windsor, and they have no desire to give us a long-term home. So if the county has no desire to give us one, wouldn't it be prudent on behalf of this council to start collecting to build one on our own? I don't know if you have an answer, if you've run into a situation like this.
So through the mayor, that would have to be something that the council would consider through your annual budget process. And if through your annual budget process, you determine that you're able to and you're willing to fund that, and then you have an express council intention to do so, then it could be considered for the development charge, but it also has to be a service that is required of the municipality to fund. So,
Thank you.
Councillor Segan?
One thing I'm looking at is when there's development in some of the areas that we're looking at right now. And in regards to affordable homes that was already mentioned, smaller lots, 40, 50-foot lots, smaller homes like we used to build in LaSalle. Is there a calculation is it based on the square footage? Is it just based on the building? Is there a calculation in the estimated number of bodies that will inhabit that property? And does that affect the development charge?
So through the mayor, the way the development charge calculation works is that we take the residential component of the cost that we need to fund and we divide it by the anticipated population growth. That gives us a development charge per capita. And then what we do is we look at Statistics Canada data on average historical persons per unit for different types of development, single, semi-detached, apartments, townhouses, etc. And then we apply the charge based on those average occupancies that we would anticipate in the future. And so if in the future that the town sees those persons per unit start to decline, let's say for single detached homes because they're building smaller lots, then as we go through the next iterative DC processes, you would see those persons per unit reduce.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so Mr. Langlois?
I just wanted to quickly thank Mr. Osborne and Mrs. Beggs for their time and effort put into this background study as well. A lot of time. We've spent all of 2025 and the patience of Watson Associates. We've had quite a bit of changes, a lot of back and forth, but it's a report. It's kind of nice taking it to the finish line, but a lot of work by everyone's been put into it.
Thank you, and I agree with all those comments. Thanks for everyone. I know it's a lot of work, and I know there's also been a lot of changes from the provincial government that's kind of hindered the process a little bit, but we're there. And so tonight we're not looking for any decisions. It's just the public meeting, and then this comes back to us March 10th for passage of the new development charges bylaw. And that's it. Thank you very much for the presentation. You still support things. I don't have any presentations or delegations, but we do have staff reports. Item 1, improvements to Gary Craig Park. Our manager of engineering, Mr. Capucci.
Thank you. Mayor and members of council. This report here is to discuss the memorials at Jerry Craig Park and how it relates to the construction along Front Road. I'll give you just a quick history of the project. We know the Front Road, that area had experienced some flooding issues, so we went through a storm sewer drainage study. We're finishing phase 3 of that this year, but phase 1 we started construction last year. And the outlet of that construction is through Jerry Craig Park, where the sewer outlet and a large pump station will be built to help handle the stormwater in the area. Within the last couple months, we determined the size that the pump would be and the footprint that it would take on the park. And roughly speaking, it's about 25 by 25 meters when you include the pumps, the electrical building, the generator, and the pathway, the roadway to get into the pumps. The pumps are fairly large. They're, for those listening, they're 5,000. There's 3 pumps that pump 5,000 liters a second. So they're fairly large to help with the flooding issues. And administration feels that after we've seen what we expect the pump station to look like and the footprint that it'll take up, the memorials in the area and the feel of that parkette will slightly change to what's there today, what's there now. And we think it would be prudent because of those changes to find a solution for the memorials that are impacted and the memorials that aren't impacted by the construction, and create a space where, you know, the people in the park can be commemorated, even though it's off-site from that location. And that was the original intent, was to continue to use that park area, but the feel is going to change with that pump station being there. When we looked at the amount of memorials impacted, over 50% of them will be impacted by the infrastructure, and more will be impacted by the construction of the infrastructure. So, and that's about 20. So there's 20 total there, and over 50% are going to be impacted by the construction. We've had success at the Loop by implementing like a area where memorials that were disturbed, we kind of created a centralized space for them. So we're using the success that we saw at the Loop and utilizing it just closer to the water's edge there by the Riverdance building. And the other positive about this is, even though we're relocating memorials there, this site, this proposed site that I show on the screen, will also serve other memorials that are within that area that might get disturbed by future expansion, or in other parks that they need to be moved or relocated. They can move to this parkette or this pergola spot here. The town doesn't do memorial trees anymore with plaques, but here we would have a placard with all the names of the people out there now, and we'd add those names all together in one centralized spot, and potentially giving the town an option to allow future people to add names of people that they want to commemorate at this pergola here. So it's a double, it serves for service for the construction project as well as future potential projects going forward. That's why the costs are broken down, not fully funded by the capital project, but it's split 60-40. Through my engagement with the people, the families of the people within the park, I've spoken to every person that I could on the list, and they were all in favor of this relocation. They were happy that it was still near the water. That was a big important feature for a few of them. And they were happy with the general idea of what the town was proposing for the pergola. The next steps would be, if approved today, we would contact all the residents. The construction, as it relates to the construction project, is likely going to be starting in March, and we would be needing to collect all the memorial plaques that are existing on site today, and we would save them for the residents there. They can pick them up and they can keep them, and we could provide that service to them. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
Thank you, Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Worship. So just one comment first. So we're talking about the park. It would be helpful in the future, though, if we just had like an overview of the park and then squared out the area that we're talking about, so you can actually see how much is being taken up. Would make a nice difference. Secondly, the reserve funds, the second one. I'm gonna write it down here. What is it? Yeah, the waterfront. What would be the leftover money in the reserve if we take this much out? Because I don't see any of those numbers, and I'm not sure what we're dealing with when it comes to that, if you don't mind.
Well, in the next report, I'm kind of going through the waterfront plan. This particular project wasn't included in there when I was creating it, but there is enough funding available to use some of that funding for this project and keep it on track with everything mentioned in my plan.
Okay, so I guess then the last follow-up is, it's open to, and I think you'd make the comments to other other future residents, the options to use the area. That's important.
Yeah, it could be, and that was kind of why we wanted to allow for future expansion and growth, so that we can create a plan that would incorporate potential future memorials. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Riccio Spagnolo.
Thank you. Through you, just a question. So you had stated that you'll be starting this in March. What's the time frame? That's one question.
Sorry, I didn't mean the pergola. I meant the sewer construction. If we were to do this, I would say more summer for us to get something properly put together. Given the green light today, it would probably be a project we would be able to complete in 26, but the construction was for the sewers.
Okay. And then another follow-up. What is the capacity for how many memorials you can have there?
Those details we didn't go too far into. It would just, I mean, it'd be a function of the size of the placard we would want to get. That's why the cost, I talk about it slightly, just materials we would use. It's a relative figure, but those types of specifics we haven't gone down yet.
And then just one more follow-up, please. Now, is this something that we would venture out to see about a sponsorship for the pergola? I guess that's just a question that I have.
I think the intention is that the pergola would be named after Jerry Craig, so that it would take from the park to the pergola.
Councillor Segan?
Through you, Mayor Merlash, I have several questions. The first one was a consultation with the families, and what was their reaction to pergola, et cetera, and the movement?
Yeah, I talked to everyone that we had on file that was able to get a hold of, and they were all received it very positively. They were very happy with it. I mentioned it briefly, but I think there was 2 or 3 families that I talked to that were adamant about it being close to the water just because of sentimental value. So they were very pleased that it would be close to the water and that the feel of the space would be improved essentially based on the fact that we were going there with our future construction, that this place would be paying homage still to their family. So everyone was taking it very positively.
Okay, next question. With regards to the funding, I had the same question as far as what's in the DMAP, what's in the reserves there, and what's in the waterfront, but we don't have a figure right now?
For the waterfront, Mr. Lang always has that. The DMAF, we could follow that up, but that one would be fairly large. That I mean, we looked at it earlier. We can get that in momentarily.
Yeah, because I'm just concerned about the financial impact. And quite frankly, in the future, I think things like this should be coming to the budget deliberations. I don't know why we're seeing it here a few months later. I don't know if because you didn't have the figures yet or the report wasn't produced yet, but things of this nature that cost us much money, I really believe that's where it should be. Although I'm not opposed to the plan, but that's just a comment that I will be watching for, I guess, overall. The final one is the cost of maintaining the amenity, because every time we build something, there's a legacy cost to it. Has there been an estimate of what this is going to cost to maintain from the future?
Okay, just on the reserve, we have $2.7 million in the reserve right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll kind of address it in the next report. You know, there's some items in the future that are dropping off that if we don't put any additional money into the reserve, we can't, like, this is compared to some of those larger projects, this is minor in nature, and that's why we can fit it in. Some of the projects that are dropping off are multi-million-dollar projects. So that's why we can fit it in, but the operating costs.
Yeah. I'll speak to the budgeting too. We got the design for the pump stations at the beginning of January. So we didn't know the scope of the size that was going to take up the footprint on the park. We had an idea, and I think we talked about it. I think we talked about it in October, that we knew that there was going to be some disturbance to that park, but we didn't know the magnitude. At the time, we wanted to keep everything at Jerry Craig Park, but based on the, like I said, the size and the change of the field and aesthetics, we didn't feel we were doing, I don't know, justice, or we're paying the proper respect to the people and the families there. And then the operating cost would be very minor operating costs in terms of the day-to-day. There's going to be like an asset management allocation for this, for like its life cycle analysis that would be captured into our asset management plan. So very minor operating costs that would be absorbed through the park operations, I would say.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Capata?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I've got some questions about the pumps because I live close by there and I will hear about this. So electric, diesel, just wanted to know what they're about and the decibels that they'll be, when they will run, so that, you know, like I said, love hearing the music from the loop, makes me very happy, but I want to make sure that when my neighbors ask, I have the appropriate information, sir.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. We did a noise study for the pumps, so they are well below, actually, I think 40 decibels, so it's like a normal conversation. So the pump noise should be relatively unaudible, so it shouldn't be impacting anyone. And those reports are available if someone wants to talk about it. It is the generator's diesel pump, but yeah, so the noise shouldn't be an issue to answer your question.
Wonderful. And just a subsequent question. So if the generator's diesels, will the generator be running when the pumps are running? I just want to make sure I understand that.
That's the backup, and that's being encased in a soundproofing to eliminate the noise.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Burns?
Yes, I have just two questions. First, Nancy Knowles asked for a bench down in this area. Is that still going to have a spot here for her bench? Whoever wants to answer that? Because I know this kind of held up the selection of a spot for her.
Thank you for the question. I believe the intent was to pull that request into what we're building here and to capture it as part of what we're doing here and to promote this spot for to start with the existing memorials in the Front Road area in Jerry Craig and capture them in this, as well as that one was on our mind too, to capture into what we want to do here.
Thank you. The next question is, what about the trees that are in Craig's Park? Are any of those transferable, be dug up with a spade and put somewhere in the landing, or has that been talked about with the neighbors?
There may be some trees that could be spaded. There's some trees that we're going to try to leave on the park. Other trees are, I think, a little bit too large for us to complete that type of work. But that is, we've tried to do that other places, and sometimes you get success, sometimes you don't. But yeah, we have looked at that. Yeah.
Final question. Those who were unhappy, what were their concerns? Because I'm sure not everybody down there is happy. Thank you.
Oddly enough, when I talked to them this go around, everyone was positive and were intrigued to see what the outcome was going to be. Yeah.
Talk to you after the meeting. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No. Thank you for bringing this report forward. I think it's important that, as much as I know we'd like these numbers for budget sessions, sometimes timing doesn't work out. But I think we're moving in the right direction for this type of project where this is coming to us now, because I think it would be wrong of us to know DMAP is happening, know we have to put in this facility at the park, and we're going to have to remove these memorials without having a plan in place. I think that would be very irresponsible for us and disrespectful. So I think that we are absolutely doing the right thing here. And, you know, it is unfortunate the price tag is a little bit high, but we do have reserves available for this. And if council isn't comfortable with the DMAP and the waterfront reserves, we also have tax stabilization, which is meant for a one-time funding, if that's something you would rather. You know, like I said, I understand wanting it at budget sessions, but sometimes things just don't work out in our favor and we have to deal with it as it is. So I'm okay with everything put forward. If everyone else on council is, the recommendations that the report of the manager of engineering dated January 14th, 2026 regarding improvements to Jerry Craig Park be received, and that council approve the creation of a new memorial space near the Riverdance building at an estimated cost of $500,000 to relocate current memorials and allow for future requests, and that project costs be funded through DMAF and waterfront reserves. Moved by Councillor Richo-Spagnolo and support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much for the report. Item 2 is the LaSalle Landing build-out funding scenario, and I'm going to go back to Mr. Langlois.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So this report, you know, it's time we're approaching the end of the latest phase of the waterfront with the LaSalle Loop in operations now. Just kind of looking forward to the next phases. Just, you know, to start off on a positive note, the original marina was purchased in 2018 by the town of LaSalle. There's been a lot of history happen already over the past 7 years. We bought it for $10 million. The original plan at that point in time was to spend, including the $10 million, I think it was $25 million over 15 years to do some basic projects down there. And then we applied for a large grant that we weren't successful. It could have been a $50 million grant. We had a big, huge, grandiose plan presented. We were unsuccessful, but, Council of the Day really liked the plan and we wanted to continue to move forward with these initiatives, which we have done. So, something that we originally planned on spending $25 million over 15 years, we've spent $30 million over 7 years. And we've, put the foot on the gas up to this point. We have the Great Event Center, which is a huge success, as well as the LaSalle Loop, which has been a great success so far. So, we've been moving. We have a lot of stuff down there right now. Originally, according to this report, the original plan was to allocate, at the point in time when a 1% tax rate increase was $400,000, was to allocate 1% tax rate increase per year for several years to eventually fund everything that was in the original $50 million plan, which is probably more like $100 million if we were going to do everything in that original plan with today's dollars. So if you look at the report under the financial implications, we've kind of looked at the history here. The original plan, the first year in 2019, we put away $500,000. And the plan after that was to put $400,000 per year away. Then I have the actual column next to that. So, the first year we put the 500, the second year we put a little bit extra, a little over the 410. And then, there's always budget constraints where we're looking to reduce. So we, on average, probably about $100,000 reduction for a number of years. Last year we were in 2025, we were successful in putting the 400,000 a year away. But in 2026, due to various reasons, councils made the decision to not put any annual contribution into the reserve. So at this point in time, we don't know if, I'm assuming that we're just not putting any more money into the reserve for some time. I don't want to make a plan assuming that we're going to put $400,000 a year away for the next several years. So the adjustments in this report assume right now we're putting $832,700 every year into this reserve. So I'm assuming that it's staying at that. Mr. Mara, unfortunately, he couldn't make today's meeting, but him and I sat, kind of looked at a plan. So our original plan was to reduce it from 400,000 to 250,000, build up for the next 3 years that would fully fund us and allow us to complete many of these projects. And all of the projects, and I'll go through that in a second. But with the reduction and assuming that we're not going to increase, it adjusts the timing of many of these projects. In the future, if we do decide to start putting money away again into this reserve, we'll be able to move some of this timing up, as well as complete some of the projects that currently don't have funding available. So it's not a no that we're not doing them. It depends on future budgets. That's kind of where we're landing at this point in time. So if you look at the page of the report that, there's the phase A, B, and we're not stuck on these phases. Like some of these phases do have to occur in certain orders because, if we're level grading and seeding and then we're going to drive over it and tear it up to build something else, it doesn't make sense to do it in that order. So there is a method to the madness, but there is flexibility to adjust the order of some of these projects and phases. But for the most part, it is in a certain order for a certain reason. So the original proposed timing, that assumed for 2026, 2027, 2028, we're going to build the annual budget up by $250,000. So phase A, the Marina Cut, Gilmore Way, the event lawn, the level grading and seeding, the parking lots, expanding the parking lots, the pylon sign in front of the event center and the event center display screen inside the event center. Those would have been accomplished by 2030. With the, assuming that we're not putting any more money into the reserves annually, that's going to delay that phase by 6 years. The generator for the event center and the loop, you know, as we've seen some of the hydro blips causing some issues down there, that you know, that is important that we do eventually put a generator in place. That's delayed by 2 years. The outdoor pool replacement, that's pretty much at the end of its life right now. We have spent quite a bit of money repairing that the last number of years and keeping it operational. We know that's something that council wants to continue to have around that area of town. So the existing pool replace, like, that'd be delayed from 2032 by 7 years. The boat ramp parking modifications would be delayed about 7 years, and the playground, pavilion, and courts, volleyball courts or tennis courts, would be delayed about 6 years. The mixed use zone redevelopment, instead of 2035, that moves to 2041. Phase E, actually, I'm gonna share my screen quickly, sorry, so we can see the plan here. Oops. Okay. So here's, just so as we're talking about it, you can, I know it's kind of small up there, but this is the current build out plan. The event center plaza, we currently have kind of a temporary asphalt plaza, but to make it permanent, the marina cut enhancements, the event lawn enhancements, which would allow us to host festivals down there, that's running sewer for the gray water, that's a requirement, as well as hydro and whatnot. That's very expensive. That's delayed about from 2038 to 2044. Promenade extensions and promenade markers, those are both delayed by about 6 years if we don't increase the funding. And then from there, you know, the original plan, as you can see, has some bridges going across all the water inlets for a big trail going around. The Millennial Garden rebuild, the boat ramp washroom rebuild, the loop, a permanent loop warming hut. Right now, you know, it's a tent, it's a good structure, but it's not going to last forever. It's not an official building. Laurier Drive rebuild, and then last off the transient marina. Those, we have dates in there to complete everything by 2046. Those right now, we will not have funding available with the current funding model. We need to build up funding and save up money over the next 15 years. If we increase it, eventually it'll be $750,000 extra a year. That is enough money to save up to pay to complete those. It's important to note in our estimates right now, we're looking at everything in today's dollars, and we have factored in a 4% inflation rate per year. Just, you know, we don't have a crystal ball, but we know prices go up every year. So we're factoring that in as well. These are estimates, conservative estimates, and that'll give us a pretty accurate picture of when we can complete these projects based on the current funding that we have available. So again, there is the ability to tweak things as we move forward, but the next phases that we're looking to complete over the next 10 years is the marina cut. That's the DMAF grant funding. It's going to clean that up right now where those break walls are and make it nice and safe. Gilmore Way, the road coming around to the parking lots. The event lawn, level grade seed, make that an area where people can go and enjoy. The parking lots, you know, when we have big events, parking, it is tough to find parking down there. The pylon sign, I know there's been a lot of requests by the public and asking, you know, what's happening there. So if there's just like at the Volmer, the pylon sign that kind of has a message of what events are coming up, and then event center display screen within the actual event center. So that's kind of the next phase, followed by as well the generator and for the event center and the loop. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. This is just to be received. Any of these future items will come forward in the future budgets as we are actually going to roll them out.
Thank you for the presentation. Members of council, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Carrick.
Just some clarification around the reserve. So you said we have 2.7 million in the reserve, and if we use 800,000 this year, that still leaves 1.9 million in the reserve, right? Because you're saying actual for 2026. Does that make sense?
We have 2.7 million in our reserve, and we're putting an additional 832,000 into the reserve. So for this year, there's a couple smaller expenses still to come through with the current project, as well with the pergola and whatnot. But and we're going to continue to build that up every year and then spend from that as we build it up.
Okay, so then I guess we're looking at what, 3.6 roughly? That will be in that reserve?
That's correct.
Okay, so I get, since we've already passed the budget and we're waiting till next year's budget, so next year's council or the next council would have to deal with this. So this is just a report to us right now, right? Because we've already passed the budget, just so I'm clear.
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct. You know, if council wants to continue to build it up, 200, it'll be 255,000 per year for 3 years to, if we want to do the original timing and have everything completed by 2046.
Okay, unless we get some grant funding or something.
That's correct. If we always apply for grants, so that can also impact as well. This assumes no grants, no more putting money away. That's what this assumes right now.
So, okay, again, I'm okay with looking at what we have there. Do we understand what we're actually dealing with? And the next council can look at this, and if we so choose fit, whoever's here, then I think that's a great direction to go, and we can look at it again, and bring the report forward again. And I don't think we can do anything anyways for the most part, other than taking money out of the reserve. Taking money out of the reserve. And there is $3.7 million in there for backup just in case. But we want to build that up. I understand that. So that's just my thinking right now. Thank you.
Councillor Byrne.
Okay, since I wasn't here when this project was started, we have a $10 million loan and we have a $7 million loan. What are the balances on those? Do we start paying in 2009 or?
Yeah, we started paying, I think 2019, we started paying down the $10 million loan, and then the $7 million, I think that was two or 3 years ago we issued that debt. So the balance, you know, it's the beginning of the loan, so it wouldn't have been drawn down that much. But the nice thing about Infrastructure Ontario, the rate that we actually got really good rates when the interest rates were low, and that rates for the life of the debt that we issued. So we know exactly what we're paying. It won't change.
So when I did the math here on your $250,000 for 3 years, so is that a cumulative 250 would have been this year, 250 next year would become $500,000, and at the end of that would become 750. And then when I take that 750 and forget the 800 we're already putting in, when I multiply that thing out, that comes to over 17 years to almost $13 million. So if those figures are right, and then if I go the other way and add the 750, it comes to almost 19 million or 20 million. Would those figures be approximately right?
That's correct.
I don't need them within a penny. I noticed some of the articles on here, I won't debate them, but some of them could be done in-house.
Yep.
Leveling and
level grade
landscaping
seed,
and
yeah,
that kind
absolutely.
of stuff. So this is excluding the operation cost.
No, I've factored in, I meant to say we have factored in the operating costs over the years. As certain, you know, as the transient marina is rolled out, that's going to take some operating costs at that point in time. So we've reallocated some of that.
So really, for the ice rink, we don't know what the operation costs are going to be as it now stands.
We've already reallocated for the ice operating costs last year. So that's the 832,000's net of the operating costs that we've already
So that's,
reallocated.
so the 832, which we're putting in now,
Yeah.
is operation cost.
That's net of we've already
And
taken.
and that's the
yeah.
payment as well?
Yeah, we've already reallocated. That's in the appropriate budget. So
So the total
within the
cost
hydro budget,
is 800,000 down there as we speak.
yep, 800 strictly for future
Yeah, yeah.
capital.
That's fine. Okay, that answers all my questions, and then I'll vote on it later. Thank you.
Just further to your question, Councillor Burns, I think what Mr. Langlois is identifying is that currently we contribute, as part of the 2026 budget, we contribute $832,000 to the reserve. We also, as part of the budget, we also have allocated money to repay the debt, as well as money to operate not only the LaSalle Loop, but also the event center and so forth. So those are contained outside of the 832. So I just wanted to be clear with that, just to ensure that folks that are watching online as well, that the 832 right now is unallocated dollars that we intend to allocate based on the list that you see on pages 3 and 4, I think, of the report.
Thank you for the clarification. Then the follow-up question would be, what does it cost us to operate it today? What are we spending total in operation costs, labor, however you want to put it, insurance? Because that's outside of this.
That's correct.
So if that's 2 million a year, so it would be 2.8 million. Just as an example, doesn't matter if it's $1 million. If it's $1, it's going to be $1 more. So if we could get that cost at some point, email all council, then we'll know what we're dealing with.
Yep. I have it. If you look at the report, like in the financial section, so far, before we've reallocated anything, we've built up $2,563,600 over since 2019. We've reallocated $1,029,000 for our debt payments, and the operating costs, we've reallocated $701,000. That's for the operating costs of the event center, the LaSalle Loop, the parks, everything down there, which leaves us with the 832,000.
And you can find that on page 5 of the report. So on page 5 of the report, it identifies how much we have cumulatively raised as part of what would be the hole in the budget, how much has been reallocated and how much remains.
I did see that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Just one for members of council. Again, the purpose of the report that you see before you is that actually prior to budget sessions, we had gotten a request from council, and we do hear it from the community as well in terms of what's coming next at the LaSalle Landing. And what we tried to do as part of the report is try to identify, what we have done and what are the next major set of projects based on a funding stream that we have. Obviously, we made some adjustments at budget time to reduce that funding stream and maintain what is the current funding stream of that $832,000. And so what Mr. Amara and Mr. Langlois are attempting to do in the report is to identify what comes next as part of the projects in terms of what we have left to do. As Mr. Langlois aptly noted, and again, Mr. Amara is pretty key in developing the order in which things are done, because we're trying to minimize, work that gets torn up for whatever the reason is, and to do the work on an orderly fashion. So there is flexibility in terms of what gets done when, but there is some things that we can't leapfrog depending on what happens with each one of the projects. And that's why you see phase A, B, C, and so forth, because those are the ones that you see. Certainly at budget time, we'll come forward and say, as part of the 2027 budget, we will put it to council whether they would like to increase the funding to this. That'll be a council decision. As well, we will then, as part of the capital budget, we will start to look at that the 832,000 along with the cumulative reserve amount, And we will then start to reallocate that towards a capital project and the associated operating cost. So you can see, you can expect that as part of the 2027 budget, some of the items you see likely in Phase A will come online as part of the budget, so that we will do things, for example, we will do the event lawn, for example, in 2030. So as part of the 2030 budget, you'll see that we'll put that as part of the cycle, and then there'll be an operating as well as a capital as well as operating costs that comes through that. Really, the purpose of the report is to really almost set some expectations, because what we were finding, quite frankly, is that there were different opinions of members of council, which is understandable, in terms of what comes next. And honestly, from administration, we've been, as Mr. Langlois aptly put, we've been going pretty hard at this for the last almost 10 years. And so we needed a chance to catch our breath to say, okay, what does come next? Because we've been going pretty rapidly at a rapid pace down there. I mean, the results speak for themselves. We get, multitude of accolades for the event center. Again, I'm not sure we've heard any negativity coming out of the LaSalle Loop. Some folks would rather not have that amenity. We understand that. That's no different than we still get the odd person, believe it or not, that believes that we shouldn't have the Volmer. And so, unfortunately, we can't make everybody happy. If we try to do that, we won't make anybody happy. And so we're trying to put the amenities to the community that the community is looking for. And so those are some of the things that we're trying to identify and set some expectations, not only for members of council and ourselves as administration, but also for members of the community. So folks that perhaps are looking for something that is a little further along can know that that's going to be a little further away, unless, of course, we get some grant money from the government. My last point is, with respect to grant money, one of the things we need to be careful of is that, generally speaking, there are very, very few grants that are 100% funded. In fact, I'm not sure there are any of those anymore. We recently got the grant for the Howard Buford drainage improvements and infrastructure work in that area. And I'm not going to, I believe that's around 60 or 70% funded, 70%. I see Mr. Farrow pointing with 7 numbers. So that's 70% funded, and that's probably the highest we've ever had, quite frankly, in terms of government funding versus our own funding. I think it's a 40-60 split on the DMAF side of things. 60% being us, not the government. So I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that even if those grants do come along and we are successful, we will find a way to find our share of the money. But we will have to be cognizant that in order to do that, we're going to have some pretty aggressive financial planning to allow that flexibility to happen. Because we don't want to be in a situation, and we get asked quite often by our local MPP, who is advocating on our behalf, saying, are you able to come up with your share? Our answer to date has always been, yes, we are. And so we need to be somewhat cognizant of that impact that says the government may come to us with a $25 million grant. It just means that we're going to have to come up with perhaps 15 million on our own end to match that. And so those are some of the things that when we talk about the timing of projects and the funding availability, we'll need to be cognizant of as time goes on. I would love to have the problem of finding 15 million if we get a $25 million grant. Let's hope we have that one day.
Okay. No other questions or comments? The recommendation is that the report of the Deputy CAO and the Treasurer dated January 19th, 2026 regarding LaSalle Landing build-out funding scenario be received. Moved by Councillor Segan, support Deputy Mayor Capata. All in favor? And that carries. The consent agenda has 7 items. Anything anyone wants to pull out and speak to directly? If not, we can move them at the same time. Okay. Right. Motion to receive the 7 items. Councillor Regis-Bagnolo and Councillor Burns. All in favor? Thank you. That carries. We don't have any committee matters on the agenda tonight. Any questions or statements by council members? Councillor Carrick and then Councillor Regis-Bagnolo.
Yeah, not sure, but 2 things. First of all, I'd like to see if we can get an update on our population to put it on the signs. being as we are coming toward the end of this term, and I'm pretty sure we're not stuck where we are right now in the signs. As I seen Lakeshore just did theirs, and they had a huge bump up. So I just want to make sure that we're relevant when it comes to our population. I'm pretty sure it's not 35,000. Probably closer to probably 37 by now, I would think. So if we can get a look at that just to see what that number is. And then secondly, along the, Joe, just kidding. No.
Councilor Carrier, on your first motion, can we get a motion? for
Do you
that?
need a motion for that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, I have to make a motion. Motion to update the population sign.
Councillor Kerrigan, support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? And that carries.
And I'll probably need a motion for this next one too then. Okay, so in regards to funding, I would like to know if it's possible that we could have administration bring back a report that shows us all the funding we've had since the beginning of this term of council, whether provincial, federal, or any other form of grants we've received to date, just to let the people know that, the bodies know that the money we are getting, we're appreciative of it. And we'd like to know what the dollar amount is, and I'm sure it's not small. And just so that we stay positive, and when we're trying to gather or go after more money, to let them know that we are very supportive, but at the same time, you know, you have to be positive when you're moving forward, trying to get extra funding. So if we could get a report, if I can make that a motion, that would be much appreciated.
So you're asking for a report of all grant funding received
Federal,
this term
provincial,
of council,
yeah, yes,
federal and provincial.
thank you. Is that moved by me?
Yep.
Okay.
Or not, I guess. Second, Councillor Riccio Spagnuolo, all in favor? And that carries. Councillor Riccio Spagnuolo?
Thank you through you to Chief Pierce. So just wanted to congratulate you and your department for a wonderful second annual Polar Plunge. You and your team shined that night, and it was a great event, and Mayor Meloche and Councillor Reno took the plunge in that cold water, and it was just great to see so many people there supporting a great cause. So congratulations to you and your staff.
Thank you for bringing that forward. I forgot that in my opening comments, and I usually have a final number, but I heard you say earlier today we still have funds coming in, so that's great as well. But congratulations to your team. Councillor Seguin?
Saturday, I was invited to the Folk Dance Festival at the Macedonian Center. And it was really, truly a celebration of the rich cultural heritages in our region, with people from, or dance groups from as far away as Toronto, Michigan. And I don't know if many of you know that I'm not only French Canadian, but I'm half Macedonian. So it was an honor to be there, and I brought my wife, but I wasn't going to go without my 89-year-old Macedonian mother. And she had a great time, and it was just truly a wonderful experience. When we moved to LaSalle, I said to my friends, the census now says there's 1.5 Macedonians now in LaSalle, and I was the 0.5. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, statements, Councillor Burns?
Yes, we had a library board meeting on the 28th of January, and it's amazing. The response to libraries across Essex County is almost doubled since the pandemic. LaSalle again leads. In 2024, we had roughly 18,500 visits to our library. This year, the year that just passed, it's 22.6 for an increase of 22%. Again, we've reached out in different programs for baby story times to toddlers times, and reaching out to the community, especially seniors, children, book clubs, to see how we can improve. Having the library more active within our community. And the goal of the Essex Library County Board is to have every household have at least one library card. So I will give a copy of this so that it can be published on our next agenda. And it shows the hours of operation for our facility as well as any other one in the county. So I'll turn that over to it's a very positive report for what we're doing at the library board. Thank you. Or they can put it on the website, A or B, I don't care.
Is it on the library board's website now?
I think it would be.
Okay, we'll find it and we can
Okay.
get a link. We'll
Thank you.
connect with
If you can't, I have a
strategy and
copy.
engagement.
Thank you.
I think for future meetings, if you prefer, if you could get that to us ahead of time, we could list that under committee matters since you are a representative on that board. Okay. Anything else? Any notices of motion? Okay. Just a report out of our closed session from February 10th, 2026. Earlier this evening, council met in closed session in accordance with section 239, section 2, subsection D of the Municipal Act 2001, being labor relations or employee negotiations for the purposes of conducting the CAO performance evaluation. We don't have any bylaws this evening, so we'll go right into our confirmatory bylaw. 2026-012 be given a first, second, and third reading and finally passed. Moved by Councillor Ruccio Spagnolo, support by Councillor Deputy Mayor Akapata. All in favor? And that carries. Schedule of meetings are below. Thank you for joining us. I'd say in person, but there's no one here. So online, hopefully. Have a good night.